15th time I've recorded this goddamn video. Okay. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Adana L, and on this channel we talk about book reviews, books that we want to read, books that we've read, authors that we love, and self-care. So if you're interested in learning about what we're going to talk about today, then stay tuned. Grab a cup of coffee, tea, whatever, water. I have a cup of green tea, and it's from Yogi Tea. So good. Green tea is so good for you. And let's go ahead and get into it. So I'm really excited about today's video because number one, it's my first one, and number two, we're talking about a book that I read that blew my mind in terms of like the way it was written. It's a book that, you know, on Goodreads and other places, you kind of either people love it or they didn't really like it, but me personally, I liked it so much that I wanted to create a whole YouTube channel just because I wanted to talk about it. The book that I'm actually talking about is called The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. It came out in 2019, I believe, and I'm gonna go ahead and pop up a picture of it there. I was actually in Target one day, and I, you know, as I do, I was walking through the book aisles and, you know, looking at things I didn't really need. I came across that book and I was like, I really love the cover art. I thought it was like really dark and twisted, and while I normally don't like scary things, like I'm the scariest person in the world, especially when it comes to like movies and stuff like that, like I can't handle that. But when it comes to books, I can kind of deal with like suspense or thriller type of books. And so I was like, that looks really interesting. I'm gonna go ahead and pick that up. Honestly, because of the year that we had in 2020, didn't get a chance to read it, but now with all my free time, I've actually been able to read it, and I love it. So again, it came out in 2019. It's Lisa Jewell's, I believe, 16th book. She's done a lot of like crime suspense books. I think I can't even name them, but like I will have like a list of some of her titles. But yeah, I loved it, and I'm really excited to talk about it. So a quick summary of the book. I don't know how to summarize it really adequately in a way that makes sense for someone without giving spoilers. So I'm going to do my best. I think I picked a hard book in order to start doing my first review with, just because again, it's so hard to like tell the story without spoiling it. But in a nutshell, it's a story of a woman who her name is Libby, and on her 25th birthday, she ends up getting a letter that kind of like changes her life. She finds out that she is inheritor of a multi-million-dollar property in one of London's like really upscale neighborhoods, and she kind of realizes that it comes, you know, throughout the story, that it comes with a really twisted past. She knows that she's an adopted woman, so she was adopted when she was really young, so she never really knew her birth parents. She grew up pretty well. You know, she was cared for, was taken care of. So as an adopted person, she wasn't, you know, she didn't really struggle for much. But she wasn't like super rich, right? And so she, you know, again, upon coming across this inheritance, she's like, well, wow, now my life has really changed. Again, she was adopted, and then she finds out through the solicitor or the lawyers that she has inherited this property. In her quest to claim the property and to understand more about who she is, she finds out that there was actually people that used to live in that house, and there was such mystery around them. There were a lot of buried secrets, just to put it mildly, and a lot of things that went on in that house. So it's her talking in present day, in, you know, 2018. The story happened back in the late 80s and early 90s. What I really love is that the book is written from the perspective of three people. So we have Libby, our main character, who is the one that inherits the property. Have Lucy, who is a woman in her late 30s who she's had her own past and her own history. She used to live in London, but then we find her in France, and where she is basically struggling. She's kind of homeless. She's caring for 2 kids, and she is struggling to make ends meet and kind of progress with her life. And then we have a third character, Henry, who actually knows the whole entire story of the house that Libby has inherited. And so he's telling the story, or his account of what actually happened in that house. And one thing that's interesting to note is that those are the 3 main characters, but there are, you know, supplemental characters that are in the story that kind of give color to that story. It's also really interesting in that the author chose to do something a little, what I thought was a little unique, in that Libby and Lucy's account of the story is happening in third person, whereas Henry's account of the story is happening in first person. And so I thought that was really interesting because it makes you a little bit more, to me, it made me a little bit more, it made me understand Henry's perspective a little bit more, and it actually felt like I could get into his mind a little bit more than I can get into the other people's. So like Libby and Lucy, it was more so like recounting what happened to them, whereas like Henry was telling us what happened, and you can kind of feel a little bit more of his emotions and what he was struggling with and what, you know, happened in his way of telling it. I thought that interesting, like, first person versus third person narration was a really interesting technique in which the author used. I also really enjoyed the fact that the author gave us kind of a wrapped up story, but also like left enough of a cliffhanger for us to formulate our own understanding or our own thought of like what would happen next. I think a lot of authors, at least the ones that I've read, they give like a cliffhanger and they don't necessarily wrap up the story that neatly, and so, or they wrap it up too neatly and there isn't anything left to like wonder or ponder. But I think that this author definitely, at least in this book, definitely gave us like enough of a wrap up of like, okay, I'm satisfied, I know exactly what happened, but I also like have enough of a little breadcrumb to like think about like what could happen or what how can this, you know, story be told further, which I think was really interesting. So again, there was a couple of different other supplemental characters that were included in the story. I did, however, find that I felt like I wanted to have a little bit more of their story told, or a little bit more of their perspective given. A little frustrating that not every character was developed in a way that made sense. So like there are, again, the three main characters, but then there are also supplemental characters that their stories are being told through the lens of the main three characters in a way that isn't necessarily, I think, true to them. Like, I think I would have enjoyed having the perspective of some of the other characters, because it's the type of story that it is. It's such a group dynamic that I think you need to have a little bit more character development for some of those supplemental characters. So I would say that's like one of the cons to me, is that the fact that there are so many characters, and if there are that many characters, why aren't some of their stories or their perspectives being shared? So I mean, it's a page turner. There were some times where I was just like, are you kidding? Like, how did you think of this, right? Like, it was just like, how did your brain come up with this type of stuff? You know, I was like, there was like sometimes I even had to like manually close my jaw, and I'm like, what? Like, huh? Like, there were some parts where it's like I thought I knew what was going to happen, and then maybe it happened, but it didn't actually happen the way I thought it was. Or just like some things I was like, that I did not see that coming at all. Like, not even. So I don't know. Either way, I loved it. If you have a love for like crime, suspense, thriller type of books, this one is really good. I also think that it was really cool that there was elements of like cults and stuff in there. Like, I love watching like documentaries about some of the cults and stuff that happened in the 60s and 70s and in the 80s, and so this is kind of set in the late 80s, early 90s, or not set, but the story happens in the late 80s and early 90s, and so like cults were kind of sort of still like not, they were like a thing, but they weren't a thing. And so it was interesting how the author decided to kind of talk about like that story of how people were slowly impressioned into making certain decisions. From that perspective as well, I was like, that is so interesting and really creepy. But yeah, again, if you love like crime, suspense, not necessarily whodunit, but like crime, suspense, like, you know, that type of thing, then I think you'll really truly enjoy this book. So definitely go out and read it if you can. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and I think it's definitely worth every single point that I gave it, because it's really good. It's a quick read. It's maybe, I read it in about a week, but depending on, you know, your different circumstances in which you have going on, it may take you longer, it may take you shorter. But I loved it. I would wholly recommend it. Definitely comment down below if you've read it, if you have read some of her other books, Lisa Jewell's other books, and what you think. Like, what do you think? I don't know. I don't want to spoil it, but like, let me know about your thoughts below. So anyway, thanks so much, guys, for letting me sit here and ramble on and on about how much I loved this book. I'm not sure what my next book is going to be, but I hope to definitely share it with you whenever I get to that point. Love you all lots, and thanks so much for stopping by.